The woman in apartment 3B. Have you ever felt someone watching you when you're completely alone? Not the paranoid feeling you get walking down a dark street, but the certainty, the absolute knowing that someone is observing your most private moments, your grief, your tears, your weakest hours when you think no one else exists in the world but you and your pain. I'm Rebecca Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a registered nurse at Hartford General Hospital in Connecticut, or at least I was, before everything happened, before I learned that the kindest gestures can hide the darkest intentions, before I discovered that loneliness can make you vulnerable to things you should never invite into your life. If you have the courage to hear what happened to me in that building, comment below with where you're watching from. But I warn you, once you know what I know, you'll never look at your neighbors the same way again. It started in March of 2019. My husband, James, had died 6 months earlier in a car accident on I-84 during a winter storm. Black ice, a semi-truck, the kind of death that's both instant and impossibly cruel. We'd been married for 9 years, no children, just us, our small house in West Hartford, and plans for a future that would never come. After he died, I couldn't stay in that house. Every room held a memory that cut like glass. His coffee mug still in the dish rack, his jacket hanging by the door, the indent on his side of the mattress that never quite disappeared no matter how many times I tried to smooth it out. I needed to escape. Not far, I couldn't afford to leave my job, but far enough that I wouldn't see his ghost in every corner. So I found a small one-bedroom apartment in a 3-story building on Riverside Avenue, about 20 minutes from the hospital. The building was old, built sometime in the 1960s, with thick walls and high ceilings, only 12 units total, quiet, mostly older tenants. Perfect for someone who wanted to disappear into her own grief without neighbors asking questions. The landlord, Mr. Brennan, was a heavy-set man in his 60s with kind eyes and hands that trembled slightly when he handed me the keys. He showed me the apartment on a grey afternoon when the sky looked like wet concrete. Unit 2A, second floor, hardwood floors that creaked in places, a small kitchen with outdated appliances, a bathroom with subway tiles, and a clawfoot tub. The bedroom faced the parking lot, and the living room window overlooked a small courtyard with overgrown hedges and a rusted swing set that no one used. I signed the lease that day, moved in the following week with nothing but my clothes, some basic furniture, and a determination to rebuild whatever was left of my life. The first few days were exactly what I needed. Silent, anonymous. I worked my shifts at the hospital, mostly night shifts because I couldn't sleep anyway, and came home to an apartment where no one knew my name or my story. The woman in 1C, Mrs. Kowalski, was elderly and nearly deaf. The couple in 2B argued in muffled voices through the walls, but never acknowledged me in the hallway. The man in 1A left for work at 6 in the morning and returned after dark. We were all strangers, sharing the same address. Apartment 3B was directly above mine. I noticed it on my 3rd day there. I was unpacking boxes in the living room when I heard footsteps overhead, soft, deliberate, the kind of walking that's careful not to disturb anyone. I looked up at the ceiling, following the sound as it moved from what I assumed was the bedroom to the kitchen area, then back again. Light steps. A woman, probably. I didn't think much of it at first, just another neighbor, another stranger. But then, on my 5th day in the apartment, I found the first note. It was a Thursday morning. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift and was exhausted, my scrubs smelling of antiseptic and the particular staleness of hospital air. I climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, my legs heavy, my mind numb. All I wanted was to collapse into bed. That's when I saw it. A small white envelope tucked halfway under my door. No name on it, no postage, just plain white paper sealed with care. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. The hallway was empty. The building was silent except for the distant hum of someone's television through a wall. I picked up the envelope, my fingers clumsy with fatigue, and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was elegant, precise, feminine. "Welcome to the building. I hope you're settling in well. If you ever need anything, I'm just upstairs in 3B. Catherine." I read it twice. Then I looked up at the ceiling, as if I could see through the plaster and wood to the apartment above. Catherine, my upstairs neighbor, the woman with the soft footsteps. It was a kind gesture, unexpected. Most people in apartment buildings don't bother with introductions anymore. We pass each other in hallways like ghosts, avoiding eye contact, protecting our privacy. But this felt nice, thoughtful. I tucked the note into my pocket and went inside. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The second note appeared 3 days later. I'd been crying. It was late, sometime past 2 in the morning, and I was sitting on the living room floor with my back against the couch, holding one of James's old sweatshirts. The kind of crying that's silent but total, where your whole body shakes and you can't catch your breath. I didn't hear anything, no footsteps upstairs, no creaking floorboards. But in the morning, when I finally dragged myself to bed as the sun began to rise, I saw it. Another envelope, slipped under my door sometime during the night. My hands were still shaky as I opened it. "I heard you last night. I know what it's like to lose someone. You're not alone. The grief will get quieter, I promise. Catherine." I stood in my doorway, the note trembling in my hands. My chest felt tight. She'd heard me, through the floor, through the walls. She'd heard my grief and responded with kindness instead of annoyance. Part of me felt exposed, vulnerable, like someone had seen me at my absolute worst, but another part of me felt comforted, seen, understood in a way I hadn't been since James died. I looked up at the ceiling again. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty hallway. Over the next 2 weeks, the notes continued. Not every day, but often enough that I began to expect them, to look for them when I came home from work. They were always kind, always brief, always exactly what I needed to hear. "You're stronger than you think. The pain won't last forever. I'm here if you need to talk." Sometimes there were small gifts with the notes. A small tin of homemade cookies, a sachet of lavender for my pillow. Once, a paperback book, a memoir about grief and healing, with a yellow sticky note marking a particular passage. I never saw Catherine, not once. I tried. I'd listen for her footsteps overhead and hurry to the stairwell, hoping to catch her coming or going. But the hallway on the 3rd floor was always empty. The door to 3B was always closed. No light visible beneath it, no sound from within. I knocked on her door twice. Both times, there was no answer. Just silence, heavy and complete. Once, I left a note of my own, thanking her for her kindness and suggesting we meet for coffee. I slipped it under her door late one evening and waited the next day, listening for any response. None came. But 2 days later, there was another envelope under my door. "I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not very good with people face to face. I hope you understand. I prefer the quiet, but I'm always here watching over you. Catherine, watching over you." I read that line 3 times. Something about it felt off. Not threatening exactly, but strange, intimate in a way that made my skin prickle, but I dismissed the feeling. She was just being kind, an awkward choice of words, nothing more. I was so desperate for connection, for someone who understood my pain, that I ignored every small warning sign my instincts tried to give me. That was my first mistake. The notes became more personal after that. More specific, details that Catherine shouldn't have known unless she was paying very close attention. "I'm glad you're sleeping better. I noticed you haven't been crying as much at night. The photo of your husband on the nightstand is lovely. He had kind eyes. You should eat more. You've lost weight. There's soup outside your door." That last one stopped me cold. I opened my door and found a ceramic bowl covered with plastic wrap, still warm. Chicken soup with vegetables, homemade, the smell rich and comforting. But how did she know I'd lost weight? How could she see the photo on my nightstand? I stood in my doorway, holding the bowl, and for the first time I felt a cold thread of unease weave through my gratitude. I looked up at the ceiling, then down the hallway, then back at the soup in my hands. She's just being observant, I told myself. She probably saw you in passing, noticed you looked thin. It's kindness, Rebecca. Just accept it. But deep down, in a place I wasn't ready to acknowledge yet, I knew something was wrong. Catherine knew too much, and I had never seen her face. The turning point came on a Tuesday night in early April. I'd been living in the building for almost 3 weeks. The notes had become a daily occurrence, sometimes twice a day. Always slipped under my door when I wasn't looking, always knowing things they shouldn't. I started keeping them in a shoebox under my bed. By that Tuesday, I had 17 notes, 17 pieces of evidence that someone was watching me far too closely. That night, I decided to stay awake, to catch Catherine in the act. I wanted to see her face, to understand who this woman was and why she seemed so invested in my grief. I made coffee, strong, black, sat on my couch facing the door with all the lights off, waiting. The building settled into its usual nighttime sounds, Mrs. Kowalski's television murmuring through the walls, the couple in 2B having a quiet argument, the radiator clanking. Then around 11:30 I heard it. Footsteps, not from above, from the hallway outside my door. Soft, careful, deliberate. I held my breath, watched the thin line of light beneath my door. A shadow passed, paused. I could hear breathing on the other side. Close, so close I could almost feel it through the wood. Then the sound of paper sliding, the soft scrape of an envelope being pushed under the door. I waited 3 seconds, 4, 5. Then I lunged for the door, yanked it open. The hallway was empty, completely empty. No one running, no footsteps fading, no doors closing, just silence and the faint smell of something floral. Lavender, maybe, or lilac. I looked left, right. Nothing. How could someone disappear that quickly? I bent down and picked up the envelope. My hands were shaking, not from fear yet, from confusion, from the impossibility of what had just happened. I opened it right there in the hallway. I know you're trying to see me, Rebecca, but some things are better left unseen. Trust me. I'm protecting you from something you're not ready to understand. Catherine. Protecting me. From what? I read the note 3 times, standing there in that empty hallway. Then I did something I should have done weeks ago. I went upstairs, to the 3rd floor, to apartment 3B. My footsteps echoed in the stairwell. The 3rd floor hallway was darker than mine. Only one working light at the far end. The door to 3B was at the near end, shrouded in shadow. I walked up to it, put my ear against the wood, listened. Nothing. No television, no footsteps, no breathing. Just the kind of silence that feels alive, watching. I knocked 3 times, firm, loud enough to wake someone if they were sleeping. Catherine, it's Rebecca from downstairs. I just want to talk. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Catherine, please, I know you're in there. I just want to meet you, to thank you properly. Still nothing. I tried the doorknob, locked, of course. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes. Then I heard it, a sound from inside, faint, like something being dragged across the floor, heavy, slow. I pressed my ear harder against the door. The dragging stopped. Then came a different sound, breathing, right on the other side of the door, close enough that I could hear the wetness in it, the labored quality, like someone who'd been running or crying or something else. Catherine? I whispered. The breathing stopped. Then a voice, so quiet I almost missed it. "Go back downstairs, Rebecca." It wasn't the voice I'd imagined. It was wrong somehow, too deep, too strained, like someone trying very hard to sound like something they weren't. I stepped back from the door. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "I just want to help," I said, louder now. "You've been so kind to me. Let me return the favor." A long pause. Then, "You can't help me. No one can. But I can help you. That's what matters. Now please, go back to your apartment." The voice cracked on that last word, broke into something that sounded almost like a sob. I should have listened, should have turned around and gone back downstairs, but something kept me there. Maybe stubbornness, maybe concern, maybe the first stirrings of real fear that needed confirmation. "Are you okay in there?" I asked. No response. "Catherine, if you're hurt or in trouble, I can call someone. I'm a nurse, I can help." The breathing started again, faster now, harsher. Then the voice came back, different this time, angry. I said, "Go back downstairs." I went. I practically ran down those stairs, back to my apartment, locked the door, put the chain on, stood there with my back against it, trying to catch my breath. That voice. There was something so wrong about it. The next morning I called in sick to work. I hadn't slept at all, just sat on my couch watching the door, waiting for another note that never came. Around 9, I went to find Mr. Brennan. His office was a small room off the building's lobby. Cluttered desk, filing cabinets, the smell of old coffee and cigarettes. He looked up when I knocked, his kind eyes crinkling. "Ms. Hayes, everything all right with the apartment?" I wanted to ask about my neighbor in 3B, Catherine. His expression changed, subtle but noticeable. The smile faded. 3B? Yes, the woman who lives above me. We've been leaving notes for each other, but I've never actually met her. I tried last night, but she wouldn't answer. Mr. Brennan set down his pen, looked at me for a long moment. "Ms. Hayes, there's no one in 3B. The words didn't make sense at first. I just stared at him. "What?" "Apartment 3B has been vacant for 8 months, since the previous tenant died." The room felt suddenly smaller, colder. "That's not possible. I've heard footsteps. I've received notes. Just last night, someone slipped a note under my door, and when I opened it, I heard them in the hallway." Mr. Brennan's expression went from confused to concerned. He stood up slowly, came around the desk. "Ms. Hayes, I think you should sit down." I didn't sit. "Show me the apartment, right now." He hesitated, then nodded, pulled a ring of keys from his desk drawer. We went upstairs together. The third-floor hallway looked different in daylight, less ominous, more shabby, just old carpet and peeling wallpaper. Mr. Brennan stopped in front of 3B. The door looked the same as last night. He sorted through his keys, found the right one, put it in the lock. The door opened with a creak. The smell hit me first. Stale air, dust, the particular emptiness of a place no one has lived in for a long time. Mr. Brennan reached inside and flipped a light switch. Nothing happened. "Electricity's been shut off," he said, but enough daylight came through the windows for me to see. The apartment was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no belongings, no signs of life, just bare floors and walls marked with rectangles where pictures had hung. I walked inside slowly. My footsteps echoed. The layout was identical to mine. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, all empty, all covered in a thin layer of dust that showed no footprints. No one had been in here for months. "The previous tenant," I heard myself say. "What happened to her?" Mr. Brennan shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. "Her name was Catherine Walsh. She was in her late 50s, lived here alone for about 15 years. Very quiet, kept to herself." He paused. "She died here, in the bedroom, natural causes, heart failure, but no one found her for almost 3 weeks." My skin went cold. 3 weeks? She had no family, no close friends. The only reason anyone noticed was the smell. One of the other tenants complained. I had to call the police. He looked down. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen. The way she'd been lying there all that time. Alone. No one checking on her. No one caring. I walked to the bedroom. It was as empty as the rest. But something felt different here. Heavier. Wrong. Did she ever interact with the other tenants? I asked. Not really. She was polite but distant. I think she was lonely, though. I'd see her sometimes sitting by her window, just watching the courtyard, hours at a time. He paused again. There was one thing. After she died, we found notebooks, dozens of them. She'd been writing about the other tenants, observations, daily routines, very detailed, almost obsessive. The police looked through them, but there was nothing illegal. Just lonely woman trying to feel connected, they said. The notebooks, the observations, the detailed knowledge of my routine, my grief, the photo on my nightstand. I felt my legs go weak. Where are the notebooks now? Thrown out with everything else. Why? I didn't answer. Just stood there in that empty bedroom where Catherine Walsh had died alone and felt the pieces clicking into place. I need to go, I said. Mr. Brennan followed me out, locked the door behind us. Ms. Hayes, if you've been hearing things or seeing things, maybe it's the stress. Grief can do strange things to the mind. I lost my wife 5 years ago. I know what it's like. I nodded, didn't trust myself to speak. Went back to my apartment, closed the door. The shoebox was still under my bed. I pulled it out. 17 notes. I read through them again, all in that same elegant feminine handwriting, all knowing things they shouldn't, all signed Catherine. I looked up at the ceiling, at the empty apartment above where a lonely woman had died watching other people's lives because she had none of her own. And I realized with absolute certainty that something that should have stayed dead was still watching me. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every creak of the building sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like someone standing in the corner of my vision. I sat on my couch with every light in the apartment on, staring at the door, waiting for another note that logic said couldn't come. The apartment above me was empty, had been empty for 8 months, but the notes were real. I could touch them, read them. 17 pieces of evidence that something impossible was happening. Around 3 in the morning, I heard it. Footsteps directly above me in the empty apartment, slow, deliberate. The same pattern I'd heard since I moved in. Bedroom to kitchen, kitchen to living room to bedroom, over and over. Like someone pacing, like someone who couldn't rest. I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I pulled up my recent calls and found the number for the police non-emergency line. Then I stopped. What would I say? That a dead woman was walking around upstairs? That I was receiving notes from someone who didn't exist? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I was crazy. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath, waited. Then I heard something else, a sound I'd heard before but never questioned. The scraping of paper on wood. Something being slid under my door. I stared at the gap beneath the door, watched as a white envelope appeared. Pushed through slowly, deliberately, impossible. I didn't move, couldn't move. The envelope lay there on my hardwood floor, white against dark wood. Real, solid, undeniable. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I don't know. Time felt broken. Finally, as dawn began to grey the windows, I got up, walked to the door, picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a note. The handwriting was shakier than before, less elegant, more desperate. I'm sorry I frightened you. I didn't mean to. I've been alone so long I forgot how to interact with the living. But you reminded me what it was like to care about someone, to watch over them, to feel needed. Please don't leave. I don't want to be alone again. I read it 3 times. The living, she'd said the living. My stomach turned. This wasn't grief playing tricks on my mind. This wasn't stress or exhaustion or some kind of breakdown. This was real. Something dead was writing to me. Something dead wanted me to stay. I called my sister in Boston. It was barely 6 in the morning, but I didn't care. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Rebecca, what's wrong?" Everything. Everything was wrong, but I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. "I need to stay with you for a few days," I said. "Can I come today?" There was a pause. "Of course, but what happened? Are you okay?" "I'll explain when I get there. I just need to leave. Now." I threw clothes into a doof case, toiletries, my phone charger, didn't bother with anything else, left the 17 notes in the shoebox under the bed, left the apartment exactly as it was. I'd come back for my things later, or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd just break the lease and lose my security deposit and never set foot in that building again. I was halfway to the door when I stopped, looked back at my apartment, at the life I'd tried to build here, at the space that was supposed to be my fresh start. Then I looked up, at the ceiling, at the empty apartment above where something that used to be Catherine Walsh was still pacing, still watching, still desperately lonely. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because I understood loneliness. Maybe because some part of me felt guilty for abandoning someone, even if that someone was dead. The footsteps above me stopped. Complete silence. Then, so faint I almost missed it, a sound like someone crying. Not through the floor, through the walls, all around me. I ran. The drive to Boston should have taken 2 hours. I made it in 90 minutes, didn't stop, didn't look back, just drove with my hands locked on the steering wheel and my eyes fixed on the road ahead. My sister Jennifer lived in a small brownstone in Cambridge. She was waiting on the steps when I pulled up, still in her pajamas, concern written all over her face. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. "Jesus, Becca, you look like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I just held on to her and tried not to cry. We went inside. She made coffee. I sat at her kitchen table and tried to figure out how to explain what had happened without her thinking I'd lost my mind. "Remember how I told you I moved into that apartment after James died?" I started. She nodded. "There was a neighbor in the apartment above mine. She started leaving me notes, kind ones, supportive, about my grief, about James, things to help me feel less alone." "That sounds nice," Jennifer said carefully. "It was, until I found out the apartment has been empty for 8 months. The woman who lived there died, alone. No one found her for 3 weeks. Jennifer's expression changed. "Becca, I know how it sounds, but the notes are real. I have 17 of them. And last night, even after I knew the apartment was empty, I heard footsteps, and another note was slipped under my door." She was quiet for a long moment. "Grief can make us see things that aren't there, feel things that aren't real. After Mom died, I used to smell her perfume in my apartment. For months, I knew it wasn't really there, but my brain was trying to hold on to her." "This is different," I said. "How?" "Because the notes tell me things I never said out loud, details about my apartment that no one could see. And because the woman who died, Catherine Walsh, she kept notebooks, dozens of them, watching the other tenants, documenting their lives. The landlord told me." Jennifer reached across the table and took my hand. "Then maybe someone found those notebooks. Maybe someone is using them to mess with you, as cruel as that sounds." I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe there was a rational explanation. But I'd heard that voice through the door. Wrong, strained, not quite human. I'd felt the presence in that empty apartment, the weight of something that shouldn't exist. "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. We spent the day trying to distract ourselves. Jennifer took me to lunch. We walked along the Charles River. She talked about her job, her boyfriend, plans for the holidays. Normal things, living things. For a few hours, I almost felt okay. But as the sun set and the sky turned dark, the anxiety came back. Heavy, suffocating. What if it followed me? What if distance didn't matter? What if Catherine Walsh's loneliness was so profound that it had created something that couldn't be escaped? That night in Jennifer's guest room, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of an unfamiliar house. Around 2 in the morning, my phone vibrated, a text message from an unknown number. My blood went cold. I didn't want to open it, didn't want to see what it said, but my hand moved anyway. Unlocked the phone, opened the message. Distance won't help. I know where you are. I can always find you. You can't leave me alone again. No one can leave me alone, ever again. My hand started shaking so badly I dropped the phone. It clattered on the hardwood floor. The screen stayed lit, the message still visible. How? How did she have my number? How did she know where I was? I hadn't told anyone about Jennifer's address, hadn't updated any records. I grabbed the phone, blocked the number, deleted the message, as if that would help, as if that would make it stop. But even as I did it, I knew the truth. This wasn't about phones or addresses or physical distance. This was about something else, something deeper. Catherine Walsh had spent 15 years in that building watching other people live, documenting their routines, their habits, their lives. And when she died, alone and undiscovered for 3 weeks, that watching didn't stop. It intensified, became something darker, something hungry. She'd found me in my grief, my vulnerability, my desperate need for connection. And now she believed I belonged to her, that I was hers to watch, to protect, to keep. I thought about the note. I don't want to be alone again. Not alone anymore. She didn't want to be alone, but what did that mean? What did she want from me? The answer came like ice water in my veins. She wanted me to die in that apartment, just like she had. Alone, undiscovered, watched over by no one. So she'd finally have company, so she'd never be alone again. I didn't tell Jennifer about the text message. How could I? She already thought I was having some kind of breakdown. If I told her that a dead woman had texted me, she'd insist I see a therapist. Maybe she'd be right. Maybe I needed professional help. But therapy couldn't stop what was happening, couldn't explain the impossible. The next morning, I made a decision. I had to go back to the apartment, not to stay, never to stay, but to gather my things, to officially break the lease, to end this connection once and for all. Jennifer tried to talk me out of it. Just let it go, she said. Lose the security deposit. I'll help you buy new clothes, new furniture. Whatever you left there isn't worth it. But it wasn't about the things. It was about taking back control, about refusing to be driven out by fear, about proving to myself and maybe to Catherine that I wasn't hers to claim. I'll be fine, I lied. I'll go during the day, pack quickly, be gone in an hour. She made me promise to keep my phone on, to call her every 30 minutes, to leave immediately if anything felt wrong. I promised, meant it, probably wouldn't keep it. The drive back to Hartford felt like driving toward a cliff. Every mile closer, my chest got tighter, my hands gripped the steering wheel harder. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the building on Riverside Avenue, I could barely breathe. The building looked different in daylight, less ominous, just old, tired, paint peeling on the window frames, gutters sagging, a place where lonely people came to disappear. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, gathering courage. Then I got out. The lobby was empty. No Mr. Brennan in his office, no Mrs. Kowalski shuffling to check her mail, just silence and the smell of old carpet and radiator heat. I climbed the stairs to the second floor. My legs felt heavy, wrong, like I was walking through water. The hallway stretched ahead of me longer than I remembered. My apartment door was exactly as I'd left it. Closed, locked, normal. I put my key in the lock, turned it. The sound was too loud in the silence. I pushed the door open. The apartment was dark. I'd left in such a hurry I hadn't opened the curtains, hadn't turned off the lights. But now, everything was off. Everything was closed, like someone had been here, tidying up, making it comfortable, welcoming. My stomach turned. I stepped inside, left the door open behind me, an escape route. The air felt thick, heavy with presence. I moved quickly to the bedroom, started pulling clothes from the closet, shoving them into trash bags. I didn't care about folding, didn't care about organization, just needed to get out. That's when I noticed the bed. It was made. Perfect hospital corners, smooth surface. I hadn't made the bed in weeks, hadn't had the energy, the emotional bandwidth, but someone had. Someone had been in my apartment while I was gone, had touched my things, had tried to make me comfortable. "No," I whispered. My voice sounded too small in the heavy air. I backed toward the door, my trash bags of clothes forgotten. That's when I saw them, notes, dozens of them, covering every surface, the kitchen counter, the coffee table, the bathroom sink, the nightstand, all in that same elegant handwriting, all saying variations of the same thing. "Come back. I miss you. Don't leave me alone. We can be together. You understand loneliness. You need me as much as I need you." My breath came in short gasps. This was more than watching, more than obsession. This was possession. Catherine Walsh thought she owned me, thought my grief gave her the right to claim me. I ran to the door, grabbed the handle. It wouldn't turn, locked from the inside. But I hadn't locked it, I'd left it open. My hands shook as I fumbled with the lock, twisted it, pulled. Nothing. The door wouldn't budge. "Let me out," I said, then louder. "Let me out!" The temperature dropped. I could see my breath. In April, in a heated building. My breath came out in white clouds. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not from above this time. From inside my apartment. Behind me. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. I pressed my back against the door. Watched in horror as a shadow moved across the living room wall. Not cast by any light source. Just moving. Darkening. Taking shape. The shape of a woman, thin, hunched, with hands that reached too far, fingers that stretched too long. Rebecca. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, that same strained quality I'd heard through the door of 3B, like someone who'd forgotten how to speak, who was trying to remember what it meant to be human. "Why did you leave? I thought we understood each other. I thought you needed me." "I don't," I managed to say. My voice cracked. "I don't need this." "Yes, you do. You're alone, just like me. Your husband is gone. Your family doesn't understand. But I understand. I've been watching you, learning you, loving you." Loving. The word made my skin crawl. This wasn't love. This was parasitic, consuming. A loneliness so profound it had survived death and now sought to drag others into its emptiness. "This isn't love," I said. Tried to sound strong. Failed. "This is you trying to keep me prisoner because you were a prisoner, alone in that apartment for 15 years, watching everyone else live while you documented their lives like they were characters in a story you could control." The shadow stopped moving, seemed to consider this. "I wasn't a prisoner. I chose to watch, chose to observe. It was safer than trying to connect, safer than risking rejection. And when I passed away, I thought it was over. But then you came, grieving, vulnerable, beautiful in your pain." "I'm not beautiful in pain," I said. "I'm just broken, and you don't get to feed on that. You don't get to use my grief to fill the void you created for yourself." The shadow moved closer. I could feel cold radiating from it, could smell something floral, lavender, the sachets, the notes, the soup, all of it contaminated with this presence, this thing that used to be Catherine Walsh. "If you leave," the voice said quieter now, "I'll follow. I've already proven I can find you. Distance means nothing. I'm not bound to this building. I'm bound to you, to your loneliness, to your need." My mind raced. She was right. The text message in Boston, she'd found me there, would find me anywhere, unless I broke the connection. But how? Then I remembered something Mr. Brennan had said. The notebooks. Catherine had documented the other tenants, their lives, their routines. That's how she'd maintained her connection to the living world, through observation, through knowing. What if I could reverse that? What if instead of being known, I became unknowable? You think you know me, I said, but you only know my grief. The parts I showed, the parts you could see. You don't know who I was before James passed away. You don't know who I'll become after. The shadow hesitated. I know enough. No, you know a version of me that's temporary. The Rebecca who cries at night, who can't sleep, who holds onto old sweatshirts. But that's not who I am. It's who I'm becoming for a while, until I heal, until I move forward. I forced myself to stand straighter, to meet where I imagined her eyes would be in that shadow. And when I heal, there will be nothing left for you to attach to. No grief, no vulnerability, no loneliness. Just a woman living her life, moving forward, forgetting this place and everything in it. The cold intensified, angry. You can't forget me. I won't let you. You can't stop me, because I'm alive, Catherine. I'm still breathing, still changing, still growing. And you're not. You're stuck, frozen in the moment of your ending, trying to pull me into that stasis. But I won't stay still. I refuse. For a long moment, nothing happened. The shadow didn't move. The cold didn't fade. Then slowly, I felt the temperature start to rise. The presence began to retreat. Not gone, but pulling back. The door lock clicked. I grabbed the handle, it turned, I pulled the door open and ran. Didn't look back, didn't grab my things, just ran down the hallway, down the stairs, out of the building, to my car. I drove. Don't remember the route, don't remember the turns. Just drove until I was back in Boston, back at Jennifer's, safe. When I finally stopped shaking enough to speak, I told her everything, expected her to call a psychiatric hospital. Instead, she just held me. I believe you, she whispered, and somehow that was enough. That night I deleted my Hartford address from every account, changed my phone number, started the process of breaking my lease remotely. Mr. Brennan didn't fight it. Maybe he knew. Maybe others had experienced similar things. Maybe Catherine Walsh had been trying to connect with tenants even before she passed. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life, harder even than the months after James passed away. At least then I understood what I was grieving. Now I was haunted by something I couldn't name, couldn't explain, couldn't escape. I stayed with Jennifer in Boston, got a temporary job at a hospital there, tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy. But every night around 2 in the morning I'd wake up, heart pounding, skin cold, certain that I'd heard footsteps, certain that I'd feel a note slide under the door. It never came, but the fear never left either. Jennifer was patient, more patient than I deserved. She never once said I was crazy, never suggested medication or therapy, though both probably would have helped. She just let me talk, let me process, let me slowly come back to myself. "Do you think it's really over?" I asked her one night, 3 weeks after I'd fled Hartford. We were sitting on her couch, drinking wine, pretending to watch a movie neither of us cared about. She was quiet for a long moment. "I think you broke something when you stood up to her, when you claimed your right to heal, to move forward. Whatever Catherine was, she was stuck. And you reminded her that you weren't. But I wasn't sure. Because late at night, when the apartment was quiet and Jennifer was asleep, I could still feel it. A presence, distant, watching, not threatening anymore, just observing, like someone standing at the edge of a crowd, close enough to see, too far to touch. Maybe that's all Catherine had ever wanted, to be close to life again, to feel connected to something warm and breathing and real. And maybe, in some twisted way, I'd given her that. For a brief time, she'd felt needed, felt seen, felt less alone. even if it was through fear and manipulation and supernatural obsession, even if it was wrong. One morning, about a month after everything happened, I received a package, no return address, postmarked from Hartford. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a small box, and inside that box was a single item, the photograph of James that had been on my nightstand. The one Catherine had mentioned in her notes, the one that shouldn't have left my apartment. Because I'd abandoned it when I ran, left it there with everything else. Someone had gone back, had retrieved it, had sent it to Jennifer's address, which I'd never given to anyone in Hartford. The photograph was undamaged, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, and tucked inside the frame was a final note. The handwriting was different this time, shakier, fading, like someone writing with their last bit of strength. I understand now. You need to heal. You need to live. I was selfish. Forgive me. This belongs with you. He had kind eyes. Hold on to that. Hold on to love, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Goodbye, Rebecca. Thank you for seeing me, even if only for a little while. Catherine. I read the note 3 times. Then I cried. Not from fear, from something else, something complicated. Grief for James, relief that this was over, and strangely, impossibly sadness for Catherine Walsh. For a woman who'd been so lonely she'd forgotten how to connect, who'd spent 15 years watching life through windows, who'd maintained that watching even after the end. I kept the photograph, put it on my nightstand in Jennifer's guest room. James smiled out at me with those kind eyes Catherine had mentioned. And for the first time in months, I smiled back. Not a big smile, not happiness, but acknowledgement that I'd loved him, that he'd loved me, and that love didn't end just because life did. It transformed, became memory, became strength, became the foundation for whatever came next. Over the next few weeks, the presence faded, that sense of being watched, of something hovering at the edges. It grew fainter, quieter, until one night I realized I couldn't feel it anymore. Catherine was gone, really gone. Maybe she'd finally found peace, or maybe she'd just accepted that I wasn't hers to claim. I never went back to that building on Riverside Avenue. Mr. Brennan mailed me my security deposit with a short note saying he understood, that I wasn't the first tenant to leave suddenly, that the building had a history. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Some places hold on to their ghosts. Some loneliness is so profound it soaks into walls, into floors, into the very air. I started therapy, not because I thought I was crazy, but because I needed to process what had happened, to separate the grief of losing James from the terror of being hunted by something that shouldn't exist. My therapist never questioned whether it was real. She just helped me understand that trauma is trauma, regardless of the source. Slowly, carefully, I began to heal. Not just from James's passing, but from everything. From the isolation I'd wrapped myself in, from the vulnerability I'd displayed so openly that it attracted something hungry for connection. I started reaching out to old friends, making new ones, joining a grief support group where people understood loss without trying to fix it, without trying to fill the void with their own needs. I learned that there's a difference between being seen and being consumed, between connection and possession, between love and obsession. Catherine had confused all of these things, had believed that watching was the same as caring, that knowing someone's routine was the same as knowing their heart. 6 months after I left Hartford, I met someone. Not romantically, just a friend, a woman named Claire who'd lost her husband 2 years earlier. We met at the grief support group, started getting coffee afterward, talking about our lives, our losses, our hopes for whatever came next. She never asked me to fill the space her husband had left, never tried to own my time or my attention. She just offered companionship, mutual understanding, the kind of connection that's freely given, freely received. And in that friendship, I finally understood what had been missing from my interaction with Catherine: choice. Catherine had chosen to watch from a distance, had chosen isolation over risk. And when loneliness became unbearable, she'd tried to force connection, to trap someone in the same isolation she'd created for herself. But real connection can't be forced, can't be manufactured through observation and manipulation. It requires vulnerability, risk, the possibility of rejection, the courage to be seen as you truly are, not as someone imagines you to be. A year after everything happened, I moved into a new apartment, in Boston this time. A bright space on the 4th floor with big windows and friendly neighbors who actually knocked on doors to say hello, who organized building barbecues and holiday parties, who treated connection as something natural, something easy. I was nervous at first, worried that getting close to people would somehow invite that same obsessive attention, but it didn't. Because these relationships were mutual, balanced, built on respect rather than need. I still think about Catherine Walsh sometimes, wonder what her life was like before the loneliness consumed her, before she started believing that watching was safer than participating. I imagine her as a young woman, maybe hurt by someone, maybe betrayed, maybe just naturally inclined towards solitude, and I feel sad for her, for the life she could have lived if she'd been brave enough to risk connection. But I also recognize that her choices weren't my responsibility. Her loneliness wasn't mine to fix, and her attempt to claim me wasn't love. It was the desperate act of someone who'd forgotten what love actually means. Love is letting go. Love is wanting someone to heal, to grow, to move forward, even if that means moving away from you. The photograph of James still sits on my nightstand, but now it's surrounded by other photos. Jennifer and me at a concert, Claire and me hiking in the White Mountains, my grief support group at a restaurant, laughing over bad jokes and good pasta. Life, messy and complicated and beautiful, the kind of life Catherine watched for 15 years but never quite understood. I'm not the same person who moved into that apartment on Riverside Avenue. Grief changed me, fear changed me, but so did survival, so did standing up to something that tried to consume me, so did choosing life over stasis, movement over stillness, connection over isolation. Sometimes, very rarely, I still feel it. That presence at the edge of my awareness, distant, fading, like an echo of an echo. I don't know if it's really Catherine or just my memory of her, my brain's way of processing trauma. But when I feel it, I do something Catherine never could. I acknowledge it, then I let it go. I don't feed it with fear. Don't give it power through attention. I just recognize that it's there, that it was real, that it's over, and then I go back to living. Which is, I think, the only way to truly honor both the living and the gone, to remember them, to learn from them, but to keep moving forward, to keep breathing, to keep changing. If you're listening to this story because you've experienced something similar, because you felt watched or followed or claimed by something that shouldn't exist, I want you to know this. You have the power, not the presence, not the ghost, not the obsession. You, because you're alive, you're changing, you're growing, and whatever is watching you is stuck, frozen, unable to move forward. All it can do is try to pull you back. But you don't have to go. You can stand up, claim your right to heal, to live, to forget. And when you do, you'll feel it. That moment when the presence realizes it has no power over you, when it begins to retreat. It's the most terrifying and liberating feeling in the world. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me through the fear, through the impossible, through the resolution. I hope you never experience what I did, but if you do, remember this. Catherine Walsh was lonely, desperate, obsessed, but she was also powerless, because the living will always have something the gone do not. The ability to change, to heal, to move forward. And that, more than anything, is what sets us free. If you enjoyed this story, Please like this video. Leave a comment telling me where you're from and subscribe to this channel for more tales of the unexplained, the impossible, and the supernatural. Remember to always check who's watching and never ignore your instincts when something feels wrong. Until next time, stay safe and keep living. The end.